No kid's Jewish education should end at 13. J.R.R. offers Ontario high school credits infused with Jewish learning online for teens across the province. Ministry approved, intellectually demanding, Jewishly transformative. J.R.R.ca. Your teen belongs here.
Does it matter if characters in film and literature appear stereotypically Jewish? How should we interpret them if they do? Are we sometimes reading too much into these texts? With movies like Wicked under scrutiny, we decided to tackle some of these questions. But before that, Yedida gives us her review of the new animated David movie. I'm Avi Feingold, and along with Yedida Eisenstadt and Matthew Leibel, we are Not in Heaven. Hey, friends. How's it going?
It's going great. How about you, friends?
I am working really hard on putting up great content on my work's website. And it's complicated. We put up a ton of new content and I'm sorting it out and organizing it. And sometimes it makes my head spin.
Matthew, what have you been up to?
I'm kind of chilling. I spent the weekend in Toronto visiting with some couples who I'm working with for their weddings and seeing some pals. So it was like a work/friends trip. And I missed my family, which means I guess I was happy to be home. And other than that, there's not a lot of gigs at this time. Not a lot of weddings, not a lot of bar mitzvahs. I'm growing a long beard, laying low, shoveling.
I was traveling. I was in Montreal. So my freezer is bedecked with Preski's babka and Montreal and bagels. So I am stocked for the next little while. And I was glad to be back home, seeing my parents. I miss my family, of course, but it was nice. It was nice to get in for a weekend. Yedida, I understand that the stuff we were discussing last week, the movie David, you finally got around to seeing.
Yeah.
I want to know, before we get into the interpretation of it, what scenes do they include and what do they decide is not worthy of children's eyes?
Yeah,
is
David's
Bathsheba...
story gets really hairy. He sends the guy off to his death in
right.
war.
Okay,
what do they
sorry.
tell?
I'll tell you where I'll give you the brackets because there's definitely going to be a sequel. The movie opens, Saul is already king, and David is out shepherding. He gets home, and Samuel is waiting there. But I'll tell you, House of David, the series on Amazon, and this cartoon production really drive home that he was a Nazarite, and so he has crazy hair and beard, which is how you
Matthew
can identify him.
Yes.
So there's bits like that I think are good and well and thoughtfully done. There's a lot of it I thought was well and thoughtfully done.
Yedida, it does David versus Goliath, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right?
So the story, it starts with David's anointment and needing to keep that secret. And soon after that, I'm not going to give you the whole play-by-play of the movie. I couldn't if I wanted to.
We read the book already.
I just want to know what
So then Saul's guard comes and takes him from his father's house, right? And you're worried that somehow they got word that David had just been anointed. But no, they're taking him to Saul because Saul needed somebody to play music for him because he's going out of his mind. So that's where it opens. And it closes after Saul and Jonathan have been killed by the Philistines in that battle, and David sort of officially can become king.
Oh,
so it's just really
Samuel
Shmuel
1.
Aleph. Yeah.
It's not King no King David.
No, it's just David. And so I think the door is open.
It's the origin story.
Oh, so there's room for a sequel. Kind of like Shmuel
There's
Bet.
lots of room.
So Shmuel Aleph.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so they didn't have to deal with Bathsheba. I took my kids, so one 6.5-year-old in first grade in a Jewish day school, and my twin 4-year-old boys to see David. The boys were, I think, a little scared. It was a little scary here and there. I think that the movie is kind of like a Rorschach test in that, you see the Christian side or you see the Jewish side, depending on which side you're most familiar with. My kids definitely didn't feel any of the Christian overtones. And I was sitting there the whole time going back and forth about how Christian it felt to me. So it does feel Christian. And there's this whole Christian programming, Christian movies and TV It looks like, I can only call it like a haskama, which is like an authorization, like a stamp of approval from this company. So if you've been to the theater lately and you've seen Angel,
Is it the JK, the Jesus kosher?
I think, no, I really think it is. Like I went down a rabbit hole on their website last night. I kept like screenshotting and sending you guys links. But if you've been to the theater and you've seen Angel like flash in front of the previews, it just flashes for a second at the beginning of the preview to show you that this is like Angel approved, and it's, everybody should go look it up. It's really interesting. So throughout the movie, like one of the tropes of David is that he's following the light, right? Follow the light, which does feel very Christian and has definitely that overtone. But it's also the beginning of Psalm 27 that Jews recite liturgically. So it's right there that the Lord is my light. So it's there in Psalms, which we associate with David anyway. So it makes a lot of sense that there's like psalmy language throughout the movie. But that felt very Christian to me. It was rated PG. There is like violence. It does get dark and scary. The Amalekites are really scary. I also kind of felt, and I hope that you guys go see this. I really thought that the Philistine army was fashioned to look like Romans. So that I think also had some like projection of later history, but that was, I can't substantiate that. That's just what it looked like to me.
So what were the moments that were Christian? And if it's easier, like if you want to compare it, I mean, it's been ages since I saw Prince of Egypt. And I guess I know the Joseph. I'm just trying to think of all the stories that are biblical in origin. Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Like those never feel Christian, right? Those feel biblical, if anything, Jewish by default, right? So what was the Christianness or the stuff that you kept saying, wait, is that Christian? Is that about David? What made it different?
I think that the difference is that I know that David is a really important historical figure for Christianity, and that Christianity, the Gospels, tie Jesus as a direct descendant of David in order to present him as a legitimate, air quotes, king of Israel, king of Judah, right, in the Messianic line. So, like, Prince of Egypt doesn't have that. So I think also it's just like the choice of character. All the business, like I said, about following the light feels very Christian, because like light and goodness in Christianity. And, we'll talk about the flip side of that probably later in the show when we get to our main topic.
Light is Jewish, though.
Right, that's the thing. That's why I think it's a Rorschach test, right? If you don't know, you don't know, and it's fine.
Yeah.
So the question is, like, am I overreading? And that, like, I kept going back and forth about that because it's all Jewish texts and ideas and story, and it's a matter of interpretation.
I'm curious about whether you think that Jewish families will have this as part of their repertoire regularly, meaning does it feel Jewish enough, or does it feel too Christian? Like, would somebody really religious show this to their kids, somebody religiously Jewish? In 5 years' time, is this going to be another Prince of Egypt that gets pulled out every Pesach?
I don't know. It remains to be seen. I thought it was fine to take my kids. I know a lot of people who were asking questions about it, kind of circumspect. I thought it was fine. I thought it was perfectly fine to take my kids to, but I also am perfectly content to talk about the New Testament and Jesus and other religions with my kid, right? Like when we were driving to the movie theater, we passed by this great big, my kids call it the Lego Palace, but there's like a huge brand new Mormon temple that's like on the highway. And, they ask, what's Mormonism? Can we go there? What's a temple? And so they're asking all these different questions about religions. And after the movie, last night at bedtime, I read to my daughter from our Bible Stories book, produced by a company called The Bible for Normal People, which isn't, I think, especially denominational. A few friends of mine have written for it. And it's like a kid's Bible stories, and the first half of it is Tanakh, and the second half of it is the New Testament, and I'm okay with that. So, I think it's fine for Jewish parents to see. It's a nice Misa. It does a good presentation of the David story, and like maybe their kids will go home and like read the story, and that's great.
Is there a climactic moment with a power ballad?
Yes. And then but they also like do some Hebrew. So when Jonathan dies, the Hebrew in the background is Ich naflu giborim, like how the mighty have fallen, which is a recurring sort of chorus in poetic eulogy after Jonathan dies. So like they're doing nice things with the text.
I see like one movie a year, and I feel like I used mine up with Zootopia too. But I am intrigued by this one. I think I would like to check it out. This stuff never really did it for me, which is, I don't know if that's weird to people listening. Like, as someone who's always been into Jewishness, and I like Jewish characters, I like Jewish stories even sometimes, but I've never been a biblical fiction kind of guy.
Speaking of movies, Wicked for Good, I guess Wicked 2 came out, the conclusion. And Hey Alma had recently written an article about whether Elphaba was Jewish or was supposed to be coded as Jewish. And then all of a sudden I got presented with a barrage of articles that were related not just to that specific question of whether Elphaba was Jewish, but whether the Munchkins were Jewish, whether the oppressed talking animals in Oz were Jewish. And all of that made me think of two things. The first was this Jon Stewart clip from a couple years ago. And the second was this comedy set from this guy, Jeremy Kaplowitz. Let me play them for you.
Here's how you know, like, Jews are still where they are. Talking to people, what I say is, have you ever seen a Harry Potter movie? And people are all like, I love the Harry Potter movies. Like, you ever see the scenes in Gringotts Bank? And they're like, I love the scenes in Gringotts Bank. He's like, do you know what those folks that run the bank are? And they're like, what? And they're like, Jews.
And then I remember, and then that person says, no, goblins. And then you go,
and you're like,
you hear yourself?
Let me show you this from, it's the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. I just want to show you a caricature. And they're like, oh, look at that. That's from Harry Potter. And you're like, no, it's a wizarding world. It's a world where it's
you can imagine anything.
And we can ride dragons, and you've got a pet owl.
And who runs the bank?
Who should run the bank? Jews.
But not only that,
no,
I feel like she was like, why'd you make it so subtle?
I was like 11 or 12 and was like, I love Harry Potter. And I remember like being in the theater and being like, this kind of
that's exactly.
It might have been the first time I said the F word.
I was going to say, 11-year-old Henrik does not swear.
I was like, ooh.
That was one of those things where...
I'm a Jewish guy, and I do think that anti-Semitism exists, but I do think that we Jews need to stop doing that thing where every time we see a nasty little goblin in a Star Wars movie, we're like, oh, that's supposed to be me? That's what you think I look like? At what point is it on us, right? If we keep doing it, we keep being like, that's my dad, I think. I was on X, the Everything app, the other day, and there was a Jewish guy who had a thread about why Dracula is Jewish coded. And this was his argument. He said he's from Eastern Europe, he's shitty about money, and he's ugly. What the are you talking about? No one thought Dracula is Jewish. Why are you listing negative traits and being like, Jew alert? If you want to say Dracula reminds you of yourself, that's great. Leave me out of it.
Which led us to this question and thinking about the notion of how and whether Jews see themselves in films where there is no necessarily overtly Jewish characters. So Harry Potter is a great example. I've never seen any Harry Potter movies at all or read a page of any of the books, but my kids have all gone through their phases. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, nor have I.
And there are, as far as I'm concerned, no overtly Jewish characters in all of Harry Potter.
You have to walk me. You guys are going to both have to walk me through this one because
I guess, Matthew, I'll ask you first.
It doesn't hit.
When you watch a movie that doesn't have any obvious Jewish characters.
So like the
right?
examples,
like
like
Star
Wars.
Star Wars. Do you stop and ask yourself, hey, Han Solo,
Never.
Clearly Jewish?
Never.
Well, because he's not, but like...
No, but like there's like a junkyard salesman character.
Public credits? The public credits are no good out here. I need something more real.
Credits will do fine.
No, they won't. What, you think you're some kind of Jedi waving your hand around like that? I'm a Toydarian. My tricks don't work on me. Only money. And no one else has a T-14 hyperdrive, I promise you that.
Jewish. Like
Never. When I watch Star Wars and I see that guy, my mind never goes to, like, he would have to be reciting Hebrew. He would have to be like doing something overtly Jewish, I think, for me to be like, that's a Jewish character. How weird. I never watch those things that are in a total different universe that you've created, sci-fi or fantasy. And like, I don't look for Christians. I don't look for Muslims. I don't look for Buddhists. Like, I just don't see. They have their own religion. They have their own world. Like
Yedida, do you?
I don't see it.
Do you have this experience?
I do sometimes, yes.
Okay, can you explain to us the process? Because I'm with Matthew and I generally don't, but I'm curious to hear your experience of when that happens and how that happens and why it happens.
When I saw Wicked for Good in the theater, and like this is one of the scenes that's written about one of the munchkin figures who has, red curly hair and is played by a Jewish actor who looks pretty Jewish. Like, he's trying to get on a train and go somewhere, and there's a new edict that's just been posted that munchkins are not allowed to leave Munchkin Land, let's say. And it did feel very World War II-y, for lack of a better term, in the way that this scene was presented. So I did see that. Did I extrapolate further from there about munchkins being coded as Jews? I did not. I just felt that scene was invoking a Holocaust thing. In reading the articles to prepare to have this conversation with you all last night, one thing that also did strike me in the sort of the larger way that some Jews think about anti-Semitism is also this notion of communal punishment, right? That the group is punished for a subset of the group or an individual's actions rather than assessing the group as individuals. But that could be taking it too far, I will admit. The other thing is that, if you don't know the trope or why Jews are associated with, banker goblins or pawnbroking aliens with Slavic or Yiddish accents, then you don't know what you're looking at, right? So if you can't identify the trope as a historic anti-Semitic trope that there are historical reasons for, then you don't know what you're seeing and it's kind of meaningless. But for people who know what they're looking at and feel it in their kishkas, it's yucky. Once I started to study anti-Semitism, I remember a bunch of years ago, I was trying to convince my stepson that he should watch Star Trek: The Next Generation, obviously, because everybody should. And I hadn't watched it since I was really a kid. And then in the interim, I'd studied a lot of history of anti-Semitism and medieval Jewish history. And then the Ferengi were on an episode and I was like, oh, this is gross, and made me really uncomfortable because the Ferengi are the Star Trek version of the short, big-nosed, big-eared, money-hungry, disgusting aliens.
Okay, so what you're pointing to is that Jews are portrayed often in a stereotypical negative manner with certain characteristics, right?
Yes.
The association with money, the desire to have global domination, or that we already have it. The physical characteristics, like you said, right? The noses, the ears, all of that stuff, the accents. And those have been used for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. If you look at the history of anti-Semitism, these tropes show up all the time. It's clear that historically, sometimes this was used in a deliberate manner. But I guess the question that is being raised here, and which we'll get to some of the other people who have, opined on this question, is anytime something like that gets used, does that automatically mean that it is designed to be anti-Semitic? That's question one that I think we have to be able to address. Even if it's not designed to be, is there as the viewer, do we get to say that actually is coded as negatively Jewish and you might want to rethink that? And, beyond that, what is the nature of what's going on here in terms of like, are we being too sensitive? Are you allowed to have a neutral character with certain features that might be stereotypically Jewish, but they're not really, it's not there, right? How many features do you need before you get to there? No, meaning it's not a character that is designed to be Jewish, right? Do you think that an author has a right to create a character that he is not trying to make anti-Semitic or trying to be Jewish, right? Not to create the anti-Semitism there. Do you deliberately have to avoid now, because these tropes are in the air, do you have to avoid making that character with a large nose?
I'm going to ask that question
or whatever it is.
Back at you differently.
I guess.
Why is it that these constellation of characteristics cluster together in the presentation of a not so sympathetic, not genteel, money hungry banker, goblin, alien? Why do we have these overlapping characteristics that happen to also overlap with like historical presentations of Jews? That's like, they're like, whether or not that's intentional in a 21st century artist's mind, there are historical reasons for it, and they are anti-Semitic.
So I guess like what I'm wondering is, do you think that the people who made Star Trek intended for these characters to be like this subtle dig at Jews? Is it that? I don't.
That's the thing. I'm saying I think we've moved beyond a place where it's intentional, because I think people mostly like are pretty like not so knowledgeable about the origins of that trope. But the origins of that trope are anti-Semitic, and Jews should be allowed to say like, enough, this is gross, please stop doing it. I mean, that's what I think Jon Stewart was pointing to that in a podcast where he called out kind of like, he wasn't calling out J.K. Rowling. He was saying your Gringotts goblins play on this anti-Semitic trope, and, you might just be invoking the trope, but that doesn't mean that it's not harming and perpetuating this trope. And for the people who know that it's coded as Jewish, it is anti-Semitic. So even if you don't mean it,
this is the Harry Potter thing, right?
Yes.
This is the Harry Potter
I can't
thing?
believe you guys haven't read Harry Potter.
So what is it? These bankers? They're these.
Yeah, they're like short, there was a picture in the prep. They're like really gross, very short, sniveling, driveling banker types.
But aren't they unsavory characters in the book or in the movie? And they handle the money that the other characters need?
Yeah.
So why can't they just be snivelly, short, gross, like bad characters? Why do they have to be Jews? Because once upon a time, Jews handled money.
I'm saying
I'm asking the people. Like Jon Stewart made this. He went viral for this. Like he's making this claim like it's a fact. I have to be honest with you. I don't think you can look at that even with the historical data and say those are Jews. Like I think that's a feeling that lots of Jews are going to get when they watch it more than anybody else, which makes me also wonder where the anti-Semitism is here. It's like there's overt anti-Semitism in the world. I don't think there's I just don't see it. I don't get the claim. I don't know. It's not you personally, Edie. I need to explain it.
We have now moved into a period where there's a lot more overt, explicit anti-Semitism.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But
that's
15 years ago, right? It was like, it was, below enough the surface that we didn't think it was going to come back up to the top.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I mean, we're reading stuff about how Dune 2 has all these kinds of, shadows of what's going on in the Middle East right now, and that's right now. I don't know. I just think in the Harry Potter thing, that doesn't strike me. I don't think you can show that and be like, look at these characters. They're so obviously Jewish. They don't do anything Jewish.
I think what Matthew's trying to get at is that when you're trying to create a negative character, you're going to give the person certain physical characteristics and certain unsavory psychological, emotional, whatever, life skills characteristics, right? You're just going to make that person that. The fact that those things in the past were coded as Jewish doesn't necessarily mean that you have to now take all of your bad characters in a movie and make them tall, dark, and handsome. There was this comedian that we saw, Jeremy Kaplowitz, who did this video. He's like, Jews have to stop seeing themselves as goblins in the movies.
Why can't the bankers be tall and blonde?
Because they're trying to be ugly characters, and tall and blonde is pretty.
Okay.
From what I gather is they want the bankers to not be loved by the audience.
Hold on, but why is tall and blonde coded as pretty?
Well, that there's actually like, I mean,
I just see lots of people go after tall blonde people. Life experience?
Right. So that's, I mean,
yeah, when you look at studies on beauty, you're looking at always averages, right? So the reason why a particularly large nose or particularly small nose in the case of Voldemort is, and I know some things about Harry Potter, even though I've never watched it, right? Or no nose is not attractive is because it is not the average of all other noses or all other ears or all other, stuff like that, right? That is part of what standards of beauty are related to. And when you have them outside, you want to make somebody ugly, you make outsized, right, characteristics, but those things are caricatures of things that were caricatured of Jews in the past also.
Right. And so I'm saying
you don't get to remove all ugly characteristics.
Yeah, Yedida, I think the problem is, like, I'm not disputing for a second that once upon a time Jews were deliberately portrayed, or the banker was deliberately portrayed as the money-lending Jew. I just think that makes us overly sensitive to all of the portrayals of these characters, and that I don't think the intent was there from the writer or the set designer or the producer. And in this case, like in a more modern case, like I think it used to be more historical.
I think that it's clear still that there can be harm even without that intent, right? It's perpetuating a stereotype and a trope that is maybe in the present, but definitely historically harmful to Jews, and definitely hits a Jewish nerve, right? Like, we don't go out of our way to, we don't deny when other groups' nerves are hit because of this or that trope being invoked. So if this is a nerve for Jewish people, it is something that, like, the artistic world should be sensitive to and make some tall blonde bankers.
So this is actually interesting because based on that, I think that we don't have the right to complain to the author or to the public that this is a problem, but we do have the right to point it out. And that is a very, very big distinction between saying, you got to do this. This is bad. This makes us look, you have to change it. You don't have the right to put this in. You have the right to do whatever you want. But we have as Jews have the right to say, historically, this has been a problem and I'm seeing this in here. And you have every right. And I applaud everybody to go and say, this is my interpretation of it, and let the court of public opinion make that decision.
That is not where I thought you were going to take that. I thought you were going to point out to me my own internal inconsistency and say, and sort of like, we've been dancing around this, that like, if Jews are the ones who are seeing this negative portrayal of themselves in these characters, then that's on them. They can interpret it otherwise.
Well, I kind of wonder.
I think that's true, but I also allow people the right to say, you have the right to have your interpretation like that. Onto that, let's go on to textual healing.
Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing. Let's get biblical. Tell me a parsha, and we'll make it physical. Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing.
Matthew.
You can get into the parsha. I think it's Bo this week, which is a great parsha. But I like that this week we started new month. I've been doing this new series to try and hype up Rosh Chodesh at the Simkin Center and like get people aware of, it's a mostly non-Jewish staff and crowd about like the fact that once upon a time Rosh Chodesh was a big deal. And Shvat, Rosh Chodesh Shvat was just a couple days ago by the time that this comes out. And I was doing a little reading and I learned that Shvat comes, like a lot of the names for our months, from when our ancestors were in Babylonia. It's Akkadian, not like French Canadian Akkadian, but Akkadian, A-K-K. A-D-I-A-N, Akkadian. And I learned that Shvat comes from a word which means...
Careful, you're 1K away from like creating problems here.
Yeah, A-K-K, just 2 Ks. We're good. We're safe. That it comes from an Akkadian word that means to strike or to lash. And they figure it's because this is during the wet season, the rainy season, right? Their winter. And so that the rains, the torrential downpours, would literally kind of beat the ground, strike the ground, lash the ground. And I just love that idea because, in Winnipeg especially, Shvat and Tu B'Shvat, which I guess will be a couple weeks away, it's always so weird. Like, why are we talking about planting trees and celebrating nature when it's winter and everything is dead? And when you know that Shvat was about kind of like that for them, the winter was the off season where you could get as much water and what laid the foundation for being able to grow. And so that growth and renewal, a lot of times you don't think of it happening during the winter in North America, but I think it's a good time. I think it's a good time to take stock. And so when thinking about Shvat and learning the origin of its name, I thought maybe there's subtle hints, celebration of trees, a metaphor for rain. There's a lot going on when it looks like it's mostly dead and cold outside. It is, but it's just kind of the seeds of everything. So maybe it'll be a good month of renewal and growth. That was my hope. So you guys can discuss both, though.
Yedida, what's on your mind?
So turns out that around the Exodus from Egypt, there are a whole bunch of things that the Israelites have to do. And there's this fabulous midrash that I think about a lot that asks, why did the Israelites have to designate their lamb 4 days in advance before the sacrifice, before they would paint their doorposts and lintels with the lamb's blood? And that's I think the second or third mitzvot that are given to the Israelites in Egypt. And they need those mitzvot so that they will be able to merit their redemption. But you only know when the 10th day of the month of Nisan is if you know when the first day of the month of Nisan is. And right at the beginning of chapter 12 in this week's Parsha, God gives Bnei Israel their first mitzvah as a community. And it's the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh, of designating and noticing and marking the new moon to know when all the holidays are going to fall out. And there's a sort of cute little bit. The verse says, HaChodesh hazeh lachem, and Chodesh is related to the word Chadash, right? It's the new moon. And the Midrash says that God, pointed, right? This is what the new moon looks like. And this, record in your brain that it looks like this, because this is how you will know that it's the new month, and you should start counting the new month so that you'll know when to celebrate all the holidays.
You know the Mishnah, the series of Mishnahs, that there was one rabbi that used to have a bunch of paintings and with different new moons. I've always liked this and this image of because you had to declare the new moon. So somebody had to go and say, I saw the new moon, and they would go to the court and say, I saw the new moon, and they would interrogate them. So one rabbi actually commissioned a series of paintings of the moon to say, did it look like this or did it look like that? And I keep thinking of going to the eye doctor, and was the moon a little like this? Was it more a little like that? And was it a little like this or was it a little like that?
You never get it right. You never feel like you're getting it right. They're always so close.
And I am so glad to realize that we are going to hit another textual healing trifecta, talking about the same topic, all independently developed. I also want to talk about HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim. It's one of my favorite verses. In fact, I like to find all the people who talk about it in an academic setting. A great example of that is Elisheva Karlbach, who is a professor of Jewish studies. She wrote a book called Palaces of Time, right? The subtitle is Jewish Calendar and Culture in Early Modern Europe. And she talks about how the calendar is works on different levels, and you have to have your own calendar, and then you have your own family calendar, and then you have the society calendar, and you have the non-Jewish calendar, and everything interacts with everything else all the time. But it really all goes back to this part of the Torah where we are given this first mitzvah nationally is to start counting time together as a people, meaning we have a calendar that is independent from everybody else. From the dominant, people that we were being subjugated to until that point. And you're never going to count based on their counting anymore. You're going to count based on yours. And I think it's Jonathan Sachs who goes and says that the distinction is the difference between freedom from doing something versus freedom to do something. And if you're on the other person's calendar, you're always, I'm free from that calendar. I have a day off, right? Whereas freedom to do is I'm on my own calendar and I get to have my own decision decision about what to do. I like Elisheva Karlbach's framing of it, and I think about it in terms of how the Jewish calendar doesn't tell us simply what day it is; it tells us what that day means, and that's why I love what you were saying, Matthew. Is that what I love about the Jewish calendar is that there's always some meaning attached to what the month is, what the specific day is, and how that works. I like that Chabad, for example, in the Chabad world has a calendar called Hayom Yom that the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe had put together, where they go and they say all the things that happen in Chabad on this given day, because on any given day, there's like some event that happens, some fact that happened. I'm like, that's kind of nice. So there are people that specifically don't say Tachanun, right? The penitential prayer, the prayers of penitence on certain days when it's a especially happy day, or when it's the day of the anniversary of the death of a great rabbi or something like that, right? So people will try to find meaning of it, and I think that's the remarkable thing about the Jewish calendar that starts today, that starts in this week's portion, is to go and say we have the freedom to create meaning from every given day, and that the Jewish calendar has that.
You know how they would always do, or there was like this stereotype, I guess, of the firefighter calendar, where they would do like, the hottest firefighter guys would do, right? And some of the sports podcasts I listen to do this. We should do, like, take on Chabad, who seem to kind of have a monopoly on the calendar, with like, get some rabbis together and do like the rabbis calendar. I'm not suggesting like in provocative poses.
I want to talk more about this, but another week. But like, I'm just going to put this as a placeholder and say that I put it there first. Have you seen this Instagram account, Rabbinic Fit Check?
Where like how you wore it, right? Like it's
basically how the asking different rabbis how they wore whatever they were wearing on any given day, and it was like fashion, saying the rabbis can be fashionable too.
I'll share this with the world. I'm sure it's extra. Read all about it. The rabbis of Winnipeg, the 6 of us, have a group chat, and that got screenshot and put into the group chat about who wore it.
Let's talk more about this at some point in the future, because I want to talk more, and we're like at the very end of our time here. Thank you for listening to Not in Heaven this week. Our producer and editor is Zachary Kaufman. Michael Freeman is the executive producer. To catch every episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support our show, consider making a donation to the CJN at thecjn.ca/donate.